Today we are going to be looking at verse 6. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. And I'm going to broadly put it into three different sections. We're going to start with the righteousness part. We're looking at what God is wanting, your personal perfection. And we're looking at then hunger and thirsting and the problem, the painful problem that people have. And then we'll look at how God fills you, how he satisfies you, which is his perfect provision. So, starting with righteousness. Hungering and thirsting for righteousness. Well, righteousness is an interesting word because I don't hear it very often in the street. You do hear it when people talk about it, but not even in prayer meeting, you don't talk about righteousness. You might talk about it in this sort of context when we're teaching. We use the word righteousness. Where does it come from? Well, the original word in English, at least, was from an Old English word called right-wise. Right-wiseness. And it then changed into righteousness about the 16th century. And it's related to words like upright. If you say someone is upright, then they are an upstanding person. It's a quality of their character. So the rightness is to do with your character. You also have a term of a right angle. Do you know anybody do maths here? A right angle is one which stands upright. It's at 90 degrees. It's perfect. It just stands there. It's not bent. It's not falling. It's standing up. We don't use the word, though, very much. If I say someone's righteous, a righteous person, looking over there, I can see a bunch of righteous people. It doesn't really land very well, does it? It gives us an idea they may be a bit fusty, a bit straight-faced. They always go to church in a suit. They're a bit legalistic and formal. They're good. Yeah. Right? It's often prefixed with the word self-righteous, which is not a good thing. We don't use the word righteous nowadays. We prefer to say good. He's a good man. Yeah, I know this guy, or this woman, or whatever it was, and they did something really good. It's Oscar Schindler. He was a good man because he saved all those people. We use that word good. We don't use the word righteous. Except Jesus, when someone came to him and he said, "You're a good teacher," he said, "Why do you call me good? No one's good apart from God alone. Are you calling me God?" Right? So we prefer to use the word good, but Jesus says good and righteous are the same thing. Why don't we like righteous? Well, righteous has to do with a standard. You must be able to stand in front of God. You have to be accepted by God. It has this concept behind it of judgment. There is something being evaluated. There is a judge, and you might not meet that judgment. So righteous is a dividing word. If I say, "Are you a righteous person?" it creates a question in your mind, doesn't it? What's exactly going on here? Because this is important. So, now the theologians among you will be saying, yeah, but Jonathan, that's not necessarily the way righteousness is being used in the Bible in all the senses. And this is true. Righteous is used in different senses in the Bible. But in the context that we're talking here, which is that we are still before Jesus has died. We're in the old covenant here. We have Jesus coming, but we're still in the old covenant. There are people who understand the old covenant. They understand being right before God. What we're talking about is your personal righteousness. How well you are doing. Are you sinning or are you not sinning? So, later on, Paul comes and understands we understand through a lot of his writings and the other disciples as well, a richer sense of righteousness. But what Matthew is talking about is the word he uses later. In verse 20, he says, I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and the Pharisees, you'll not get to heaven. So, they're looking at all these people, and let's go and look at the people listening. That they have the scribes and the Pharisees, who are like, if you like, they're the professional religious people. They are the epitome of righteousness. They do everything to be righteous before God. And the normal people, and then we look at this crowd, this big crowd that's coming before Jesus. The normal people, they can't do that. They know they're not as good as these good people, these righteous people. So anyway, we've got the Sermon on the Mount, we've got big crowds. Jesus is very popular. The big crowds are flocking to him at this point. They're taxed, they're conquered, they're downtrodden, they're not in a good place. The nation of Israel has not had any prophet for hundreds and hundreds of years. And they're not there all because they want to hear about righteousness. Some of them are there for the show, the buzz, the excitement, miracles, healings, people getting healed. Some of them, Jesus criticized them, are only there for the food that they got fed. People are not there because they're necessarily spiritual people wanting to know about God. Some are there because, is this the Messiah? Is he going to free us from the Romans? There's an expectancy at this particular time of something's happening. We're going to be freed from the Romans. We're going to have a victory. Maybe Israel's going to become really important again. They'll be looking back to the previous generation. They maybe have their little baseball caps that say MIGA on it. Make Israel great again. So there is that aspect. Then there are other people who are there out of fear. And these are particularly the religious people. They're scared that this guy is a heretic. They are absolutely livid that he seems to be calling himself God. They are scared of blasphemy and they are offended. And they're also wanting to retain their power and control, because these people flocking to hear this man, this is dangerous. This is possibly insurrection material. Some people, though, are there because they want to know. They want healing. They want hope. They want some help. And all these different people are in the crowd. Jesus is speaking to them all. We have the same sort of thing. We have different responses. Some people don't bother about righteousness. They get on with life. They do very well. Or maybe they don't do so well, but they don't bother about righteousness. They don't bother about God. They get on. They do get a job. They do. They have kids. They have family. They potentially do very well because they're not bothered about God. And we know some people who then say, okay, I don't bother about God because I don't believe God exists. That righteousness is just a stupid word because it doesn't mean anything, because there is no such thing as good and bad if God doesn't exist. So both of those sort of categories, they're kind of a materialistic view of things. And at the time of Jesus, there wouldn't have been as many people who were really atheistic, but lots of people who are just getting on with life. Then we have the next category of people who are moralistic. And these are people who say, I am a good person, I do what I can. My standards are okay. I do what I see as being fit. It's my truth, my version of a standard of good and right. And I think I'm okay. I'm a good person. And if you think about it, the Pharisees are actually a subcategory of this. The Pharisees are the ones who are saying, my standard is what makes me righteous. I go to the Bible to get my standard. I read the Torah. I read all these things and I've worked out all the rules that I can do, and if I tick off all these boxes, I'm going to be righteous, and God says I'm righteous. Jesus zones in on this, and he says, yes, you tithe even down to the little herbs in your cupboard. 1/10 of your mill and dill and cumin in your cupboards. You do it to that level. But you don't think about mercy. So it's their standard, it's not God's standard. And also they say, look, if you're sick, if you're poor, that must be your sin. They've got a rule, they've got a rationalization for all of this. And then they have the last category, which is believers, people who really believe. Someone who believes, someone who hears God, first of all. You have to hear God's voice. Then you have to believe and accept what he says. So, with that in mind, what does God say about being righteous? To these people who are Old Testament people. They've got the law, they've got the prophets. They don't have the New Testament. They don't know they're just hearing Jesus for the first time. What's in their head? Let's go to the Psalms. Psalm 143. Hear my prayer, O Lord. Give ear to my pleas for mercy. In your faithfulness answer me, in your righteousness. Enter not into judgment with your servant, for no one living is righteous before you. That's hard to be a believer. If God says no one living is righteous before you. Because where does it leave you? So then you say, are you righteous? Which gives us a problem. Because if God says no one's righteous before you, before him, how do you want to come close to a God like that and stay with him? Happily, the Old Testament people, they know more than that. They know that actually, in the previous psalm, just up the page from this one, it's not on there, but the very last verse of the previous psalm, 142. Bring me out of prison that I may give thanks to your name. The righteous will surround me, for you will deal bountifully with me. So the Bible seems to be contradicting itself here. No one living is righteous, but the righteous will surround you. You might not be able to resolve that, but one of the things about believing is you don't need to understand everything. Now, I think now with the light that we have, we can resolve that. But not everybody at that time would be able to resolve that. So if you still believe that God says no one's righteous, but he's a loving and kind God, and you can see that there is an element in the Old Testament where people are declared righteous, then you've got a hope and you hold on to that. But all the same, for many, many people, there is this painful problem because you know you're not righteous and you want it. If you want to please God, you want to be righteous because you don't want to displease him. So let's carry on in Psalm 143. For the enemy has pursued my soul, he has crushed my life to the ground, he has made me sit in darkness like those long dead. Therefore my spirit faints within me, my heart within me is appalled. I remember the days of old, I meditate on all that you've done, I ponder the work of your hands, I stretch out my hands to you, my soul thirsts for you like a parched land. Answer me quickly, O Lord, my spirit fails. Hide not your face from me. My soul thirsts. These are the words of David. Jesus said, hungry and thirsty. So thirsting and hunger. What is it? What is it? What's going on here? It's one of these things in the Bible where something physical is used as an analogy of something spiritual. It's all through everything of the Old Testament that there is a physical reality, a story, and it relates to a spiritual truth. So hungry and thirsty is for something that you want. No, it's not for what you want. It's for what you need. You need food. You need water. Otherwise, you're going to die. So your body has a mechanism. And inside your body, it detects the lack of food, it detects the lack of water, and it sends messages to your brain saying, oh! And it's not pleasant. It's not a pleasant experience to be hungry. But what it does is it brings a problem of your true state to your senses. And this is what God does. If you become aware that you're not righteous, it's because he's given his law, or he's given you a conscience. He's given whatever mechanism for you to become aware that you have a problem. And your problem is that you're not righteous. And that will lead to your death. So you need help. But it's not a nice place to be. Who likes to be hungry? Who likes to be thirsty? It's painful. It's awkward. So there's another aspect to this, though, that I think during the week some of us did some fasting. We probably did days fasting. Now, some of you may have fasted for longer. Maybe after 2 or 3 days you become really, really hungry. After 3 days, then your body starts processing all the rubbish that it hadn't got to because you were continually feeding yourself before, and you feel really rotten. And then after a few more days, you just feel hungry, but it doesn't get any worse. You feel hungry, hungry, hungry. But really, all the time, you control who switches that hunger on and off. So fasting is a sensation of hunger, but it's not true hunger, because you know that you just have to go to the food cupboard and go in and get it. That's maybe a bit of temptation if you want to do a week or something like that. But you know, there's no desperation there. So, you've heard that phrase, you don't know where your next meal is coming from. That's true hunger, and I've never experienced that. And maybe nobody in the room has ever experienced that. But we might have experienced it spiritually. And your stories as you've come to know Christ, or maybe some of you don't know Christ yet. Are you suffering because you want to be righteous and you haven't got it? And you want it and you don't know how to get it? And will God come through with the goods? So when you're in that sort of situation, there's a bit of a temptation to set the bar lower and become more righteous, like the Pharisees do. They set the bar a bit lower. If I do this, do this, do this, do this. They're like people on a raft in the middle of the sea. It's like you've got water everywhere. Maybe I should drink some of that water, and that will satisfy my thirst. No, it won't. It'll make it worse for you. So if you go on and you establish your own way of getting out of your problem, it might make it worse. You'll end up like a Pharisee. You'll think you're good, but you're not. You can be like a good Christian. You can come to church. You can be in the worship band. You can pray. You can do all these things. But it's not those things that make you righteous. They're all good things to do. Don't stop doing them. They're all good things to do. But you don't do it to make yourself righteous. So what happens here, if we go back to our passage in Matthew, is that all these people, they know that, hey, if I obey the law, I'm going to be righteous. So what happens is that does Jesus explain how this is, actually you can do this? No, he doesn't actually. Jesus makes it worse for them. Jesus says, do not come do not think I've come to abolish the law or the prophets. I've not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. And then he says, for example, about anger. He says, you've heard it said to those of old, you shall not murder, and whoever murders will be liable to judgment. I say to you, everyone who's angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. He talks about lust. You've heard what is said, you shall not commit adultery, but I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has committed adultery in his heart. I think a lot of the men in that audience will be looking at their floor at that point. He talks about divorce. He talks about loving your enemies. He takes the law, what you have to be righteous, and instead of putting it here, which maybe you can jump over that wall, he sticks it right up to the ceiling. You're never going to jump over that wall. Jesus doesn't give you an easy standard. Because he wants to give you God's standard, and he wants you to know that you're going to fail. Because if you know that you're going to fail, you will take his answer when he comes with it. So, the classic example of this is if we look in Romans. We have this man who was a Pharisee of Pharisees, Paul, who wanted to please God. He wanted to please God so much that he was willing to kill the heretics who were Christians at the time. But at the same time, he was tormented by the fact that he couldn't keep the law. He'd broken it in one place, and it caused him to think that he was dead. So what did he say about the law? The law is holy. The commandment is holy and righteous and good. So God's law is righteous. He desires it. Paul wants this. He's hungering and thirsting. And then he talks about his effect, his discovering of what the law is. I'll not read all of it. I do not understand my own actions, for I do not do what I want, but I do the very thing I hate. Now if I do what I do not want, I agree with the law that it's good, righteous. So it's no longer I who do it, but sin that dwells within me. But I know that nothing good dwells in me, that is in my flesh. For I have the desire to do what is right. He's hungering and thirsting. He wants to do what's right. He wants to please God. Many of us, we want to please God, but not the ability to carry it out. For I do not do the good I want, but the evil I do not want is what I keep on doing. Now if I do what I do not want, it is no longer I who do it, but sin that dwells within me. So I find the law to do what I want to do right, evil lies close at hand. For I delight in the law of God. He delights in it. But he's in torment in my inner being. I see in my members another law waging war against the law of my mind. So the law of his mind is him assenting that God's good, and making me captive to the law of sin that dwells in my members. Wretched man that I am. I think if we've ever come to the place where we just realize that there's nothing good about our own selves, we haven't got anything good to give to God, that he will say, that's good enough. That's a good place to be. That's why you're blessed if you hunger and thirst. Because it sounds like you're in a terrible place, but hungering and thirsting after God, if it's God doing it and you being driven towards God and his answer, is a state of blessing. So, again, I read the passage in Psalm 3 and 4, and you can Psalm 143, verses 3 and 4, and you could see that this David was not in a good place. My spirit fails. He said, my heart within me is appalled. He's crushed my life to the ground. The enemy has pursued my soul. Soul The enemy has pursued his soul. These are not physical enemies. This is the enemy of his soul. You don't think he was an overly stable person, David. He wasn't somebody with it all together. He's crushed my life. My spirit faints within me. This is not a picture of success. So it's better to be in existential angst than being a success, if it's for righteousness. And that's why Jesus, on the other hand, he paints the woes. Hey, if you've got it all together now, woe to you. So if you're sitting here and you know that you haven't got it all together in your life, that you are not one of the successful people necessarily, it's not bad to be successful. You're not necessarily in a bad place if you drive towards God. So sometimes the darkest hour is just before the dawn, and then we start to look at what God has done to provide for us. So unfortunately Ian jumped in with the next verse, the next chapter. So here we go. On the last day of the feast, the great day. See, John 7 verse 37. Jesus stood up and cried out, "If anyone thirsts, let him come to me and drink. Whoever believes in me, as the scripture said, out of his heart will flow rivers of living water." Now he said this about the Spirit, whom those who believed him were to receive. For as yet the Spirit had not been given, because Jesus was not yet glorified. We're talking about thirst, and Jesus uses the term thirst. He also refers to himself as the bread of life. He addresses both. And there's things you could say about the different things, but look at that. Jesus says, if you're thirsty, come to me. The woman at the well, he says something very similar. He talks about if you drink the water that I give you, you'll never be thirsty again. So, I've got to remember that these people were under the old covenant. They were under the law. But they were with Jesus. They're getting glimpses of something different. As your faith has saved you, Jesus says to somebody. He says to another woman, neither do I condemn you. There's mercy and there's hope coming through. And when you read all the Beatitudes, kind of like promises, aren't they? Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. These are not laws coming out. These are promises that God is going to do something. This is hope. And if you also look at it in another way, these are all things that are written in the passive voice. So a long time ago, I used to be an English teacher as a foreign language, and the passive voice is when you say, it's not the opposite to the active, I do something, it's something will be done to me. So, they shall be comforted. They shall inherit the earth. Well, that's active technically, but hey, you inherit something, it's because somebody gives it to you. They shall be satisfied. So it's not you who does this. Somebody gives it to you. It's done to you by God. And this is the important thing. First of all, you cannot solve your problem. Nobody can. We can't solve our problem. Only God solves the problem. Everything comes from him. And you will not just be filled. The word that says filled, or translated filled or satisfied, is actually the same word that is given about the goose that you're fattening for Christmas. This is probably not a brilliant analogy, but it's not just filled. It's absolutely stuffed to overflowing. It's God's view of, I'll give you something, a full measure, overflowing. This is not just, I'll give you just enough. This is, I'll give you and I'll give you more. Now somehow, I said before, this is we've got a lot more revelation now because we know Jesus and we know what has been revealed in the New Testament. But it's not necessarily new things. We talked about the conundrum earlier on about, some people are righteous, but God says no one's righteous. Well, if we go back into Genesis, somebody who's named as righteous is Noah. Genesis 6, it says, verse 9, I think, Noah was a righteous man. And then in Genesis 15, verse 8, we're talking about Abraham. And it says, God says to Abraham, look towards heaven and number the stars, if you are able to number them. Then he said to him, so shall your offspring be. And this is a man who was 99. And he believed the Lord, and he counted it to him as righteousness. God has spoken to someone. He spoke to Abraham. Abraham believed something that was impossible. No one's righteous. It's impossible. You can't be righteous. But God's talking about people being righteous. It's impossible. Do you believe it? Abraham believed God even though it was impossible. He was 99. His wife was 89, I think. Noah believed God that he was about to judge the world. Hebrews says more about that he believed God and he was righteous because of it. This story about the passage where all the heroes of the faith are mentioned. So he believed God. Noah believed what God said. So we can imagine Noah was also credited with the righteousness because he believed God, in the same way that Abraham was. Same way, if you believe God, God credits you with righteousness. It doesn't change. That's always been the same. And you have a far greater revelation than Abraham or Noah had. You know far more. We've been so blessed to live in this covenant. We have so much view of all the riches that God has done. We understand how he's done it to a much greater extent. We don't understand everything, but through the Spirit. So don't stay in Romans 7 with this man. If you're in that place, don't stay there. Don't stay there. Believe God. Because when you go on, what happens to the man in Romans 7? Well, he hits Romans 8. There is therefore no condemnation for you in Christ Jesus. That little phrase, in Christ Jesus, gives you the clue. The law of the Spirit of life has set you free in Christ Jesus from the law of sin and death. I'm not going to read all of that. I'd love to, but it's those words of hope, and it basically says that through the Spirit, God's requirements of righteousness are met. So let me take a little digression. While I was preparing this, we follow a particular Christian ministry that looks at persecuted Christians around the world. And the update came through the door, and one of the things it does in the update is it talks to you about particular cases of people. It usually gives them a different name because some of their circumstances might be sensitive, or they might be able to be traced back by people and they're in a persecution position. So if they're in North Korea, you don't want the authorities finding out about them. Anyway, this was a guy who we will call Yasin. And as we read his story, you'll see the things that are happening. And it's the same. Though he was brought up in a Muslim home, he wasn't content in his faith. Until I became an adult, I followed Islamic law. I went to the mosque, but I was not comfortable with it. I did all my religious duties, but I was doing it for my friend's sake. It wasn't because I believed in it. I did not have much faith in Islam. It was habit, but not true worship. He had lots of things he wanted to ask. I argued with God a lot. It's good to argue with God. It is. You'll never be right, but you can argue, and he wants you to argue with him. I said, God, if you exist, I don't want to sin. He's hungering and thirsting. I want to live with you. I'm asking you to show yourself for me. But no response came to Yassin's desperate questions. So you can imagine he stayed in that space for a little while. He stopped going to the mosques regularly, fending off inquiries from friends with the excuse that work was too busy. He kept praying for answers. And eventually an answer came from an unexpected source, a dream. I was sleeping and I saw someone coming towards me, says Yassin. I cannot describe how beautiful he was. His hair was long, he wore a scarf on his head. He was so beautiful. I could not stop looking at him. He put his hand on my head and said, "You are my beloved child. This is the way, follow me." A Muslim friend told him the dream was from the devil and not to think about it anymore. But Yassin couldn't believe the devil was responsible. He decided to ask a Christian friend in the village. The friend told him, "This is God showing himself to you." And the bit that really got me was he was taken to a pastor and the pastor gave him a Bible. The pastor was a Muslim convert. The first time Yassin read the Bible, he wept. The first thing I read in this Bible, in my own language, was Matthew 5, the Sermon on the Mount. He remembers. I cried because of the beautiful words in it. The words of Jesus gave me peace in my heart. And that bit got me. So, there's the two things. First of all, his reaction to reading these words. They're promises. They're words of hope. They may seem that the bar is right up there, but Jesus gives them to you as words of hope and promise. That you will have perfection. Now the thing is, it won't be your perfection, it's his perfection, but it's your perfection because you're in him. And then the second thing was, I could not stop myself looking at him. So then we go on to the last point, which is something that's been hiding in plain sight all the time. Jesus is talking about hungering and thirsting after righteousness to people in the Old Covenant, wanting to be righteous so they could meet God's commands. But when we look at Psalm 143, what are you thirsting for? What are you thirsting for? Well, you're not thirsting for something. You're thirsting for someone. We look at other references of David in the Psalms. Psalm 63, "O God, you are my God, earnestly I seek you." He's seeking God earnestly. I'll just find the whole reference here. Earnestly I seek you, my soul thirsts for you, my flesh faints for you, as in a dry and weary land where there is no water. Psalm 42, it's the same thing, my soul thirsts for God, for the living God. God is a person, not a principle. You can never be righteous, you can never tick all those boxes, you can never meet a requirement. The principle of being just and innocent before the law and being acknowledged as being, you're okay, mate, you can come in, is not the way it works. Only God Only God can do it. It's not a standard to attain, it's a person to have, and the person is God. God doesn't give righteousness. God gives himself. So, he gives you himself, and he gives you himself in two ways. First of all, his sacrifice pays for all your sins. And secondly, his Spirit changes your nature. And it's his Spirit that he sees being your righteousness, because he is your righteousness. So the clue, really, probably a good place to look at it is actually in that Psalm 63. My soul thirsts for you, my flesh faints for you, as in a dry and weary land where there is no water. The next verse. So I have looked upon you in the sanctuary. If you're thirsting for righteousness, if you want more righteousness, then the only thing you have to do is look to Jesus. You have to look at God. He is the one who's captivating. He is the one that you can't stop looking at. His way is love, not legality. His way is not to give you your own righteousness so that you can say, look at me, I'm a righteous person, God, you've got to let me in. His way is to incorporate you in himself and give you your own righteousness. The devil takes you outside and says, look at yourself, judge your performance. God takes you to stop looking at yourself and to look at him. It's a little bit like that thing the other day, like that quote about being humble. You know, it's thinking of yourself less. You think of yourself, it's not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less. You're thinking of yourself less because you're looking at somebody else. You're thinking about somebody else. You're filling your life, you're filling yourself with something. You're not looking at yourself. You're forgetting about yourself. There's a chorus that says, fix your eyes on Jesus, look full in his beautiful face, and the things of the earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his beauty and grace. And I think that's where we need to go, is that we don't understand this because we're used to thinking about systems and laws and government and things like that. God's way is totally different. God's way is to give you himself.